Lambis, welcome, and I pass the floor to you to lead the session.
Thank you so much, Ilva. Thank you all for joining us today to speak about this very interesting topic, the issue of data. There's going to be a lot of product placement today. We heard about IGNITX, we heard about my company. We'll hear from three amazing professionals who will be here today to talk to us about this topic. A very famous literary character once said, data, I cannot make bricks without clay. What Sherlock Holmes meant by that is that data is a foundational element of any major project or any major issue. And here we're lucky to have three experts that can help us understand the challenge behind properly collecting data, protecting data, and then analyzing data to leverage it for the improvement of our events. These experts include, in the order that I will be speaking with them, Tim Gotels. Tim, hello. He's joining us from Switzerland with over 20 years of experience working in sports with, firsthand understanding of the complexities of what it means to work with data and how an event relies on data. And he is a member of the fantastic team of Wiz team, leading its business development and growth since you joined, I think, in 2017. So it's great to have you, and we will jump to you in a second to talk to us about how we can appropriately collect the data. Then we have Marie-Dominique Alessandri. A disclaimer here, Marie-Dominique and I worked together at the Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games. She was our data protection officer, and she was instrumental in ensuring that Paris 2024 was very successful in that domain. As we applied for the first time at that extent, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, at such a major event. So Marie-Dominique, throughout her career, has held various roles around data privacy and risk management and compliance. So she will be very useful to us to try to decipher this apocryphal GDPR and explain why it is so important to protect the data. So thank you so much, Marie-Dominique, for being with us today. And then the last but not least colleague today is Kevin Martel, who's founder and CEO of Free Events. Even bigger disclaimer here, because not only did we work together, he was working in my team, Kevin, and yet still here, surviving and smiling. And he pulled together on the first, I think, at the games level, data analysis and management teams, very instrumental in ensuring that we had good data captured and used in issue resolution, including during games time at our main operations center. And now he leads his own company, and he will speak to us more about how we can best leverage data to optimize operations. So welcome to you as well, Kevin. So let's dig right into it and start with you, Tim. Maybe I know you have a few slides, so feel free to get them on our screen. We spoke about data, and therefore, and usually for those of us that are familiar with the games business, this data collection is usually through a games management system. What do we need to get right from the outset so that the data is clean, clear, reliable, useful? And how do we then go about knowing what data we need to collect?
Yeah, it's a very thanks for asking the question. It's a very good question, and I think it's a key one that I think we're going to try to respond to in the next couple of minutes. So first of all, thanks for having us, Neo and Ignite's team. We work a lot together, so I think we're going to come up with some real use case examples, including the recent Islamic Games. But to respond to your question, Lambis, I think the key element here, as you can see on the slide, is not only about systems, but is how you collect on one side, and more importantly, how you manage the data. Because a lot of people tend to believe, and I think when you're new to our sports world, that having a system is solving people's world problems. Unfortunately, it's only one piece of the equation. So I'm gonna dive in shortly into how we usually, or what are the best practices in terms of data collection, and more importantly, data management from obviously a more system perspective. Okay. So I think my key message here, and it goes in line with your question, Lambis, is how do you go about aligning the three elements you have here? Data is part of the system. I could have replaced systems by data, because obviously the system is collecting data regarding the functional area. Is it accreditation, sport entries, volunteer management? But I think one of the key elements we've been experiencing over the last 10 plus years since we are implementing systems is what is really key to make it work. And I have kind of taken this alignment between people, process, and system from my dear friend Christian Page, because it's something he learned me a while ago. And the key here is to say, it's not because you have a great system, that things are going to work well. You need to have the people and the processes aligned with each other. So even if you have a great system and you have a way of collecting data, the way and the process you collect data, the way you manage the data, the way you're going to clean up the data, and for that you need people. It's really, really key to the whole, I would say, success of a project. So again, aligning people, processes, and systems and data as a result are really. So if there's one thing I would like you to remember from today's presentation on my side, is definitely this one. So I'm happy to pause there, or obviously continue.
I think we can slightly pause here. If you can pull that again, that slide on the screen, maybe we can see how Marie, Dominique, and Kevin might want to react to it. What is your take on this approach that Tim just elaborated? Maybe we start with you, Marie Dominique.
Hello, then I think it's funny because I have exactly the same, well, not as on the slide, but I came to the same conclusion. It's people, process, and system technology working together is a key success factor for event. And but I meant it from the paradigm of privacy, so compliance.
Well, to the extent that it works for you, it's fantastic, and your approach is what matters here. How about you, Kevin? When it comes to analysis and leveraging the data, is it the same logic?
Exactly the same logic, because data is really here to support the business and the business decision, and we have to take data into the process of decision. If we don't put the data in the process of the decision, then the data and all the analysis we can do, all the insights we can drive will not serve to anything. So
Fantastic.
I'm fully aligned with that. Data has to be in the process and to be also in the empowerment of people, because we want people to just integrate data in their decision and just not having data to replace people. It's not the idea.
Fantastic. And I do have to say, it's quite bold on your side, Tim, given that you work on systems, to say that system is not an objective in itself. It's a solution to a problem, but not it's a tool for the solution of the problem, but not the solution itself. You can have the best tool in the world, but if you don't know how to use it and why you're using it, it's not gonna do much for you. That's important for all of you people using ChatGPT, by the way, but that's not the topic of today. AI was on a different session in this summit. Continue.
Even push it a bit further, because you could have a system that might not be perfect, but if you have a good process and good people, you will get through. I think the people and the processes, like just mentioned, are way more important than the system, and it's quite a bit, like you say, ironic to say that from perspective. I always say sometimes we're not a technology company, we're a people company, because it's also the people that are implementing or helping to implement, the platform. And this is, again, why we work so well with Neo and the team of Ignite, because they know this process and people part. And it's so much easier when you work with people that know this to implement the system. When you work with people or when you have no process, it's super complicated. So 100%.
100%. Let's move on.
Okay, let's move on. So yeah, I think the other item I wanted to highlight is ownership of data. It's often sometimes complex because you might have different business owners, and when you're looking at data, sometimes there is crossover in data. I take a typical example between accreditation or sport entries, or between accreditation volunteers. I would say the data you want to collect or you need to collect, there is overlap between some function areas. So I think it's also important to keep that in mind, especially, and this is where, working in silos, is sometimes a bit of challenge, because every function area, every FA has the ownership of their own process and systems. And sometimes, or often, there is crossover from a data perspective. So yeah, I'm happy to pause there as well to see if anyone has to comment there.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because a classic issue with organizing committees, from the smallest event to the biggest event, is of course working in silos. It's just, I guess, in human nature. And therefore, even though in some committees we have very good technology teams, sometimes systems tend to be developed separately in silos. From your point of view, Marie-Dominique, when we have all those systems in parallel, does it mean, what does it mean in terms of data protection? Does it have an impact?
No, well, you will work with a system just as you work with any system. It has you take into account the characteristic of having all data in silos, but then you apply the same principles. There is no.
It's not safer or more dangerous to have everything in one.
Well, I don't think so. Yeah, you have to assess the risk and just identify the correct measures, protection measures, the ones that will apply to your system.
Okay, very clear. How about you, Kevin, when it comes to taking the data and trying to make sort of cross-functional analysis?
Yes, for sure, it will be more complicated to consolidate all the data and to have a cross-functional analysis and so on. And the analysis by itself, it will take more time. So the time you save by building tools in silos and not asking to other people what do they need and how they need it, you will waste it at the end by just consolidating data. But today, right now, we have the different data platform that enables to do it. So it's possible. It's not impossible, but for sure it will be more complicated.
Yeah, and sometimes timing might be an issue, right? Your volunteer and workforce function area is going to start before accreditation sport entries. And when they define maybe what are the data fields they want to collect, you might not have a counterpart on the sport entries or accreditation function area. So it's something that we suffer a lot from, because it's something we are aware, but when there is no counterpart, except like trying to make the functional area that is already starting before aware that there needs to be an oversight as well on the other FAs. It's sometimes just because of a timing issue that things might become a bit more complex.
No, 100% agree. Even though you would think that for some events that have been happening for over 100 years, certain things should be streamlined by now, but anyways, we still keep reinventing sometimes the wheel.
That's why we have people like you guys, because you've done this before. so
yeah, we're not 100 years old, but thank you for the compliment. Go for it.
Cool. Data collection. I think the data collection part is definitely an important part, because before you start analyzing the data, you just need to collect it. And we spoke already about different function areas, different timings. What you see here on the slide, we did a little exercise internally within the company, asking to our team, where is data coming from, If we would have time, I would have loved to do the exercise with the group here, but you see the results. So we basically asked the team, okay, where is data coming from? Here you see it's participants' data because that's what we usually collect in our platform. But you see, registration is a big one. So as you know, most of the platforms have a front end public registration part. And APIs is another big one for the people on the call that don't know what an API is. It's just a way, let's call it a toolbox that allows you to basically extract or exchange data between different external systems or systems that are maybe not in the same infrastructure or ecosystem. So I think from a data collection perspective, it's important to identify and look at, when you look at a major sport event, what is the data you want to collect or need to collect, but also where that data might be coming from, just to align the different data sources. And like I mentioned, registration is usually a big part, but not only. And as most of you will know, working in the sports space, you usually have, also, public portals from an organization perspective. Sometimes we call them responsible organizations or ALOs when you speak about accreditation, where also you can have, typically different process flows. Again, back to the processes between a nomination workflow where you invite someone to register to collect the information, or you as an organization, let's say your OBS, and you need to, you're collecting all the data on behalf of your workforce. You can enter that data, by yourself. The data validation, I didn't put it there, is for us a key. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just had a question now because you said something that prompted it. And that's for you, Marie-Dominique. What responsibility, if any, does an accreditation liaison officer in this example have for data protection?
In regards of data protection regulation, he has no particular responsibility. The one that is responsible, or I would say accountable, is the organizing committee, for example, but individuals don't have responsibility, and they won't have penalties. They won't. But of course, this person will have operational responsibility, and he will have to report to his hierarchy and executives, but not in regards of GDPR.
Okay, so they would not be in trouble. Good to know. That's reassuring. Thank you, Marie-Dominique. Back to you, Tim.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention here was, it's not on the slide, but it's, data validation. When you collect data, having validation rules ahead of time, on a registration form or a field level or an import level, are really key to get clean data into the system. It's not going to solve, or it's usually, unfortunately, not solving all the issues. We will get in a minute to data management and review process, but it's one of the key elements. And obviously systems are helping with that, these days, so that you don't have to do, reviewing field by field and record by record. Okay, I'm gonna skip this. I mean, I think people know what integrations are. They can be external, internal. They can be cross-application. So I think today the technology is there again, the technology is usually not the issue. It's more, again, back to the process. What is your from where to where do you want to exchange data? What is the frequency? What is the process? What data, you need to have, triggered in one system, that then triggering an action to another system, usually, background check, status or accreditation status is usually something you want to send back to an external system, because if you have media registering in a separate system, volunteers often, if it's different providers, these are things you want to be able to provide back from a central system to an external system. I think, again, these days are pretty easy. What data is collected? I mean, I just put a few examples here. Any data for, you need to define what are you, what's the reason you're collecting data for. It's obviously what Kevin said in the beginning. it needs to be at the essence of the question and the system. You shouldn't just collect data for the pleasure and the sake of collecting data. And there again, the function area will depend or will indicate or dictate what is the information you want to collect, and data validation there is quite key.
Let's stay to that slide again, because I think again I'm pointing at the Marie-Dominique, because I think this slide is very very important for you as well, right? I mean, as a data protection officer in a company, like, why are we asking these things?
Yeah, well, it's a very good illustration, and after working for the Olympic Games, both of us know that we currently collected this kind of data. What strikes me on these slides is that everything is personal data in regards of regulation. So I mean, I assume that personal data on the first bullet point means identification data, or
date of birth, name, because everything is personal data, I suppose. Yes,
everything is personal data because, for example, passport data is relates to an individual that can be identified directly. So that's the definition. Sorry, for personal data. Photo, uniform size. This is indirect personal data, but it's still personal data. So everything is personal data on this list.
100%. 100%. And then it's the usual drama with the photos. Do people smile? Do they have to wear hats or glasses or all these things? I think it feels like we keep sharing the same instructions every time, and every time people just send you what they have or crop Facebook photos or Instagram photos. Oh well, it is what it is.
And it's part of the next chapter of data management and review. It's one of the elements we see people are unfortunately need to spend time on, because it's something you need to have a process for picture review, and we get to that in a minute.
Why don't we jump to that? Yes,
to that. Let's go. So data review, again a few examples between data. I'll jump to the next one. Where we speak about photo review system features. AI is going soon, hopefully, to help a lot of people here. I think it's definitely something that is still today also on our side and our clients. It's still a pretty I'm gonna call it cumbersome process. Obviously, systems are helping, because you could have a workflow where your ALOs, or your responsible organizations are managing part of the data. So instead of having one central person within, let's say, Paris 2024 managing this, you kind of share the responsibility wider up in order to have smaller chunks of data checked by different people. And this is where, again, a system can help. I'm pretty sure AI will soon help on items like this, because they can be pretty automated these days. One thing as well, which I think is a bit of an innovation element these days, but having self-servicing kiosks as well, like you have at the airport, where you scan your passport, where you have a camera. So basically you have a triangular check between the picture you've uploaded yourself in front of the kiosk and the picture you've uploaded of the picture you have on your passport or your ID document, where you have a triangulation between the data. We're doing this for a major sport competition next summer. Cannot mention the name, but everyone can imagine which big event, quite a few actually, but is going on the other side of the continent. But yeah, it's also a way of being able to automate the data, because, as you know, most of the major events still today, they rely on volunteers, on a big accreditation center, where people come with a passport. There is a check that is done, which is a visual check. It's done by a human. I'm not saying that machines are doing things better than humans, but from a data error perspective, if you can automate those processes, we see that helps. I mean,
100%.
Marie-Dominique, I'm sure there's a lot of questions about data protection there, depending on the country, but yeah, it's an interesting one that is evolving more and more these days.
But it does exist in some countries. I think of I know Qatar, for example, has the possibility arriving at the airport to register for an event right there on automatic terminal. So it is a practice that seems maybe not at the major events, maybe not at the Olympic or the Paralympic Games or the World Cup, but it's something that is starting to happen, to use the same system that we use for passport immigration checks to the event industry, no?
Yeah, the technology is not new, as you said, like
Yeah.
we've been doing this at airports for the last 10 years. I think the application in sport is maybe a bit more recent. We know, unfortunately, that sports is quite operational. So I think from an innovation perspective, we tend to like sometimes a bit behind. There's also a cost element, to be honest, because the difference between an airport and an Olympic Games, as an example, is it's a temporary event. So the infrastructure price and the cost of equipment for an airport to be able to, write it off over a number of years, or even a stadium like they do with NFL now. They also have facial recognition with companies that are specialized in this area. It's more cost effective to have a standalone venue like a venue airport, etc., than having a temporary event like an Olympic Games, the Commonwealth Games, Islamic Games, because it's an event for 1 month, and so the equipment 100%. That you need to rent or purchase, it's quite expensive. So
100%. We're going to have to switch to Marie-Dominique very quickly, but I know you have a couple more topics you want to quickly tell us.
I think we kind of through the main things. I think we mentioned picture review, duplicate management is a big question. It's always a big topic. Approvals, quota check, background check. So they're all things people are quite familiar with. I will just finish with this one. I think the only constant is change. I think we work in events. We know that things are changed. So I think that there needs to be an approach, I think, for people working events to understand that change is a constant thing and that you need to be a bit flexible, and it's okay. I think it's something that we all know. Obviously, having a phased approach and a better organization always helps, right? But we know that we often, the deadline of an event or a sport event, it's unmovable, as we all know and as we all experience. So you have no choice than just moving forward and doing things. So yeah, that's what I wanted to conclude with, and continuing the discussion with you guys.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tim. Maybe one thing that we can do while before we switch to Marie-Dominique, I know there were a couple of questions, so we might as well maybe address them now because they really were connected to you. I think there's one question from my wonderful Andrea McCory, who is listening. Hi, Andrea. And actually, I think that question might be more to you, Marie-Dominique. I mean, I can probably answer it too. Andrea is asking, did Paris do any specific education on GDPR to staff, to some, to everyone? Did we all have to sign any documents for compliance? How do we manage such a tool at the OCOG level, if we speak at the Olympic Games, but it applies also to smaller LOCs?
We did have mandatory training for staff. And so everyone, we monitored the participation of staff to this training. And I think there was something also in the contract, but it was also related to cybersecurity. Our teams were committed to respect Paris 2024 assets contractually, I mean, and personal data is a part of these assets.
Indeed, as I'm sure it's the case now for other organizing committees, all of us at Paris 2024 had to complete a certain number of compulsory online trainings, on which we were monitored, and if we were not doing it, we would get hammered with the reminders about it. Very fun. GDPR was integrated in on those topics, and from a certain point onwards, for some of the dinosaurs that arrived very early, it was not in our contract. GDPR was not necessarily, in existence back then, but then from a certain point onwards, it was included as one of those commitments we had to comply with, Andrea. So thank you. And then there was another question: how do we tell what type of group Hold on. Let me see that question again, because I'm trying to understand.
It's basically, how do you register? How do you decide if you register people individually? They are responsible, or
exactly. Yes. So how about you then, Tim? Maybe you can speak to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it you have some populations that are a bit more towards one or the other. So typically, media, it's usually could be an open registration link, it could be an invitation, but usually people register individually with an approval process in the back end. I would say from the moment you have big groups, I would say suppliers, typically security companies, FNBs, your broadcasters, etc. They're usually going via a responsible organization. And I would say if you have a really big event, the reason why you work with ALOs and you have a lot of data is you take a funnel approach, right? Instead of having a lot of people managing everyone, you basically funnel the approach, and your ALO is allowing, or your responsible organization is allowing you to have a subset of data managed by, I would say, single individuals. And then from an approval process, you can also have, that's more the FIFA terminology, but AAs, accreditation approvals, when you speak about accreditation, that are then managing a number of ALOs. So again, it goes through the funnel approach where you're managing, big chunks of data that you cut into smaller chunks, because otherwise it's too much to manage for one team. So I would say that's a bit maybe the differentiator factor, is like, how much data do you need to manage, and do you have an organization that is responsible for a number or a subset of the data.
Thank you so much,
also,
Kevin.
Yes, and also many people you have to train to just teach them how they have to fill the tool and so on, because it's not an easy task to perform, to fill with all the right information at the right moment, because we have deadline to respect. So if you have less people to train because you have allos, then it will be easier to manage people.
Very good point. Thank you so much, and hopefully that answers Livia's question. Thank you so much. We'll definitely come back to you, Tim. But now let's move on to Marie Dominique. We have already spoken about GDPR. We have introduced this infamous concept to the conversation. So again, one of those things that everybody knows how to spell, but not necessarily understands fully. Can you, in a few words, tell us what it is all about? And even though it is a European regulation, it has become sort of a bit of a standard that more or less other people try to respect in a certain way, even if they're not European, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are absolutely right. It's GDPR has become a global benchmark and to data protection. And in the world of events outside Europe, it is important to visit every event globally because events are, because of the scale of the event, because of their visibility, and also because when we organize a big event, we tend to collect sensitive data. So, and now regarding the main principles, I can introduce you to 5 of the most important ones. I mean, 5 that were particularly important during the preparation of the games. I'm just
in Paris. Yes. While you're trying to show it on the screen,
exactly.
This is something that we found ourselves in an interesting situation in Europe, because Paris 2024 was the first Olympic and Paralympic Games where GDPR had to be applied at a huge scale. Our friends in Milano Cortina, who are going to be delivering, I'm sure, fantastic games in a few weeks' time now, came just after, but hopefully learned from our issues over there. And then we have the French Alps following suit in 2030. So it is not theoretical. GDPR really applies and affects the way we operate. And I just mentioned Olympic and Paralympic Games. There's plenty other events that are happening in the continent that have had to, from one day to the other, kind of like introduce those principles. And let's see what those principles, the core principles, are.
Okay, so let's start with, I listed eventually 5 main principles, but you have many more for GDPR. Not so much more, but you have more. Let's start with purpose limitation. which tells you to collect data only for a specific, explicit and legitimate purpose. That tells you you should only process data for the purpose it was collected for, and you can't reuse the data for another purpose. For example, if you collect data for people who are buying tickets, you can't, well, you're going to use this data to provide access control or send them information regarding the sports sessions they have registered to, but you're not supposed to do marketing communication unless they have consented to it and you have informed them previously.
Two questions on that one, because I think that's an interesting one when we come back to the question of silos of before.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is if we have a ticketing portal and I introduce my name, last name, date of birth, blah, 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 Tim cannot take that information and then say, well, Lambis, I have your profile. I might as well use the same data for your accreditation system. So that you don't have to enter it again. So I would have to re-enter it on an accreditation system, unless, if I understand you correctly, either I have explicitly allowed him to use this for other purposes, or unless we have this Uber system that collects my data once and then it can apply it to different operations, correct?
Well, you could do anything actually. The point is you need to make this explicit to the what we call data subjects. It's the individuals from whom we collect data. So if it's explicit enough, you could just collect at just one point of collect and explain at this point that the data is going to be used both for accreditation and because you are buying a ticket. But if you only register to the ticket platform, and then after a while, the event organization finds it convenient to reuse the data without letting people know, letting the individuals know that data that was originally collected for tickets are going to be reused for accreditation, then you are in breach.
Okay. Very good. We'll come back to, there's a very good question about the policing of it, but let's go through your principles and we'll come back to it in a minute.
Well, you're very welcome to ask questions anyway. I'm just trying to not be too formal, but well. Then another important principle is data minimization. That's one key principle, and I'm sure Kevin and we'll discuss that later on during his session. But well, according to data minimization, you absolutely need to collect only data that are strictly necessary for the purpose that you are pursuing. So there is a difference between data that you absolutely need to have for this purpose and data that could be nice to have. And there is a huge difference. So it's just not possible in regards of GDPR to collect data just because at one point they might be useful for you. You need to plan before. And if you consider, well, we have, Kevin and I have a common example, which is accreditation, but you could do analytics with data that are collected for accreditation purpose, but then you just have to know it when you collect the data so you can inform the person, the individuals, and you let them know, okay, we're collecting this data from you because we want to deliver accreditation and also because we are going to analyze for future use, for legacy, and etc. But then as long as it's explicit and legitimate, it's okay to do that. But otherwise, if you collect extra data just because you just don't know yet what you're going to do with that, but it might be useful, then you are in breach. Data minimization is really important for the control. Yeah.
I really have to ask the question raised by Daniela, who's listening, because she's like, well, all this is great and fantastic, but how is this control? I mean, of course, we have the Marie-Dominiques of this world, but they cannot be everywhere. I mean, who is policing? It's a matter of, it's one thing to have an expert like yourself to help us apply the right rules, but who actually polices to make sure that these are respected?
Well, just as Tim said previously, for system, GDPR is, well, you don't apply it just for the sake of GDPR. I think these principles, they really matter for operational reasons. For example, data minimization, it helps you lower the risk of data exposure in case of a breach. You don't want to have to explain to people that you were collecting extra data just in case, and that this data just went away in the nature. So it's a component of trust with the individuals who gave the data to you. Then in the countries, the European countries where GDPR is enforced, the subject within organization is managed mostly by DPOs internally, and then the organization itself is accountable for its practice. So the organization, just like the Paris 2024 organizing committee, had to uphold some documentation to prove that our practices were compliant. And you have also local authorities, administrative authorities. In case of France, it's called the CNIL. And during the games, we were very much under scrutiny of the CNIL. Eventually, they came and they audited us like 7 times. So it's very concrete in the case of Europe.
Yeah. So I think, Daniela, every country, if we focus on the European, European as an EU zone for the time being, every country has its own authority for the protection of personal data. And in particular, for a major sports event, maybe a smaller event might slip through the cracks, but major events like the Olympic Games, the Paralympic Games, FIFA, other major championships, they tend to attract a lot of attention. So the chances of you getting checked are very, very important. As Marie-Dominique said, we had 7 controls, and she's referring only to games time. We're not talking about what happened before, as we're trying to also determine systems, as we're trying to integrate a top sponsor to our cybersecurity systems, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go into that apocryphal story. It's for drinks on a different in a different context. So in the case of the Paris 2024 games, CNIL was very present, and we were very regularly called, and Marie-Dominique in particular, to ensure that we were doing what we have to. So it is a true and actual issue. It's not just based on good faith on the part of the organizer. Hopefully that answers your question, and maybe we can continue with the other principles.
Oh yeah, third principle, transparency. I've said a few words about that already, but one of the most important. It tells you that you have to clearly inform individuals about how long you're going to use their data. And for example, typically all our systems within Paris 2024, the ones that were open to on the internet, for example, volunteer registration or ticket platform, they all had this privacy notice to explain in details what we were going to, why we were collecting the data, what we were going to do, and how long we were going to keep them. And this is absolutely mandatory as well in regards of the GDPR. There is also an operational benefit from that, because when people, and it's not only because of GDPR compliance, when you explain the individuals what you're going to do with their data, you get less complaints as well. And that's also something that you just don't want to have when you're planning and executing an event. It's better if people don't complain about the way you manage their data, or if you lower the number of inquiries regarding this topic.
100%.
So
maybe
yeah.
Marie-Dominique, if I can stop you there, just to get a practical example from Tim, maybe. So Tim, on your systems, on the things that you put in place, how does it work? Is there a message, as Marie-Dominique said, and then people have to actively acknowledge that I've read and understood. It's one of those things that nobody ever reads, but nevertheless, you need to click and actively say, okay, I've understood what my data is going to be used for.
Yeah, it's usually one of the key elements when you register from a front end, a registration form, either as an ALO or as an individual. You usually have terms and conditions, or you can call them differently, and the idea is for our customer to then define what is the purpose of the collection of the data, which can be wider than maybe accreditation data if you're an accreditation system.
But in that case, Tim, it's the ALO that clicks and accepts the usage of the data. We're assuming, therefore, that the ALO, through some sort of process, accepts that responsibility on behalf of the people that he's registering on the system.
Yeah, we've seen the different cases where it's indeed the ALO accepting, and then they have their internal process, on how they deal with that. And sometimes there is a double, I would say, security where the ALO is accepting, but if it's an invitation process or a nomination process where the data subject, is filling in the form itself, you might have a second, I would say, a privacy policy agreement box. In today's systems, this is quite flexible. It depends on the client. The challenge we sometimes have as a provider is that we need to educate our clients, and then this is important, depending on the market, depending on the project. We have several DPOs within the company that are trained DPOs. They go regular training. We do internal trainings as well, in order that we are all aware from an account services or delivery perspective that these are important elements, so that we not opening a system on behalf of our client without having these elements addressed. And so that's an important one.
Thank you so much. Very, very clear, Tim. Marie-Dominique, back to you. We talked about the transparency.
Then storage limitation. Next point. It means don't keep the data unless you need them. Remove data that is no longer necessary, as I said, and it was stated in our privacy policies. We inform the individuals on the storage of the data, and most of the data from Paris 2024 has been deleted, let's say, during the 3 months after post-games. But in some cases, we had also legal requirements that applied, and that forced us to keep the data for much longer. I'm thinking about health data, for example, the ones that were collected during when we were providing medical service. And French regulation tells us that we need to keep them for at least 10 years. So we had to manage this as a project to get this data archived for 10 years, though Paris 2024 as an organization has disappeared. No question, Lambis, on this one.
Well, on this one,
reaction on my side. Yes, thank you. When we say deleted, it's really for personal information, because we did a huge work also to anonymize information and to collect the data linked to operation and not to personal information. So after the end, we send a lot of data to the IOC, for example, for instance, but it was not personal information, and we did a huge work to ensure that.
Exactly. Well, when you want to archive, you go through an anonymization process usually, and it would be at the same time, of course, you have this obligation of deletion, but of course, data is also very very precious. Like it's we call it the new oil, and there are so many lessons that can be learned from the experience of the organizers of such a big event. So but yeah, that's typically a GDPR topic.
It's interesting because anonymizing the data, of course, protects us in a certain way, but at the same time, depending on the data that we erase, we lose a bit of the quality of the information. If we speak about food and beverage, for example, and trying to understand and determine behaviors, if we knew not necessarily the name of the person, but their age or where they came from, and their behavior through, let's say, the Paris 2024 ecosystem, that might allow us to better understand, okay, what do Gen Z people consume at the venue as opposed to Gen X, etc. Are we allowed to keep certain things if the name is removed, or even that is not possible?
Well, it's difficult to answer, like give a general answer, but for example, in the case of food and beverage, considering the scale of the event, having not the precise age, but
age group.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You won't, having this won't allow you to identify a single individual, you know, and that's typically the definition of anonymization. If you go through a process that won't enable you to go back and individualize the data subject, the original person, then it's okay. You can consider this is not personal data anymore, and you can still keep data that are going to be very useful for legacy, for example.
Gotcha. Okay. And then that's very clear. And then privacy by design, it was the last principle you wanted to...
Yeah, the last one, very important one during the organization of the games as well. And according to privacy by design, you need to embed privacy from the very start of the project and process. So you, for example, typically you need to contract with vendors who have the best practices. I mean, of course, vendors will be selected based on their capacity to answer your operational need, but I mean, that's the first criteria. But if you work closely from the start as a DPO with your vendors, with your project manager, you will be able to integrate the best practices very early in the project. And we all know that making changes at the at a later phase will be costly and sometimes inefficient. So that's what privacy by design is about.
Okay, very, very clear. Now, you gave us, Marie-Dominique, and we will sort of conclude with you. You gave us a good understanding, I think very clear, and thank you for that, of the main GDPR principles. But it begs the question, and Ilva asked it also on the chat, in practice, were there any negative experiences? And was the data misused at some point? Let's take the example of Paris 2024. Did we not respect GDPR at some point? Did we have any real issues, or is it just theoretical?
No, we did. I mean, it's just an organization common thing that usually people break rules, but they don't mean to do it. It's just because they are not aware at certain points. But yeah, we did face issues, and for example, data breaches, or we try to leverage this to limit this by training people, but of course it's just our day-to-day life as a DPO. You face questions and sometimes issues.
So it's of course problems can exist. The question is also how you try to address them, not hide them, but also and that's why sometimes we see when there are data leaks or other issues, we get all those emails sent to us saying we have the responsibility to inform you that there has been a data leak, blah, 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 blah. So that's part also of compliance with GDPR, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, organizations would do that. They do that because they have to. It's an obligation. And then, of course, no one wants to get to that point where data are being exposed. So that's kind of a worst case scenario. But I think that, yeah, we didn't have to do this on a large scale during the games
in Paris. Thank you so much, Marie-Dominique. Tim, you wanted to comment?
I have a practical example, Lambis, on this one.
Please.
We had, I think, one occasion where one of our customers collected data for guest management accreditation, and then they reused it for commercial purposes because they were just doing a mail shot for the next event. And typically, as a data subject, this is, I mean, I received it because I was registered, but this is where I think people can and might rightfully complain that the data is misused, you know. So, but I think in general, and this was 3 years ago. So, but I think in general, today, especially in Europe, people are quite aware of what they cannot do. I think sometimes there is more, it's not really a data leak, but people still send data through Excel, and Excel, which has first name, last name, passport information. And when I say, internally in our company, it happened as well. Although you have a system that is allowing you to share a link with access to a report which has all the information with the password and the terms and conditions, it's still so easy, even when you are within that space, to make a mistake by sending an Excel spreadsheet with passport information or information that could be intercepted. It's not always the case, but yeah.
No, 100%, and again, the human factor is key into all of this. But to answer a question before we head to Kevin from Nicola, who's listening, do we know of any major public case of a breach of GDPR, and what were the consequences for that organization? Is there an example?
Yeah, well, yeah, the news are quite full of these kind of stories. I'm just trying to find something that would be appropriate, a good example. Yeah, well, there is an old one, and I think it's a bit caricatural, but it was quite, maybe less than 10 years ago, but it was data that leaked in the US from how can I put it? But like a social network to meet people and have extra-conjugal relationship. And because, the data leaked and they were published, so they were made public by the hackers. And people committed suicide because of that, because it had such an impact on their personal life and personal reputation.
But what was the consequence? I mean, the consequences are tragic, obviously, for those individuals. But I think the question relates to what are the consequences for the organization with a breach happen.
Okay. Well, I think in the US it's probably different. That the organization got sued probably for missing the essential protection measures. More close to us in Europe, if this kind of thing happen, you're going to have audits from the authorities, the data protection authorities, and eventually you will get fined if they consider that you were not protecting efficiently the data that you were processing. And in the case of GDPR, fines can go up to 20 million euros or 44%, of the annual revenue in the worst case scenario. So it's a lot.
It's not a joke. It's not a joke.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marie-Dominique. Of course,
You're
stay
welcome.
with us. And we're heading to Kevin, because we spoke about how we collect, we spoke about how we protect, and now we need to see how we can analyze our data. And I guess the question for you, Kevin, is with tools like Power BI and things like that are widely available, people tend to confuse analysis with a dashboard, a beautiful pie chart or beautiful sort of lines that are intertwined. Is that what you mean by analysis? Is that analysis?
No, not at all. And thanks for your question, because I think it's a confusion. Really, we do really often this kind of confusion. So thanks for the question. It's really a good way to start to present what we call analysis. And so you're right. Data analysis is not a dashboard. I will share a dashboard after during the presentation, but it's just a way to make the presentation more engaging. Dashboard is more a mean to perform data analysis. It's just a tool at the end, just a tool to facilitate the data analysis. But it's not the analysis by itself. The data analysis is really to support a business decision. So every data project should start with a question and with a business case. The question could be how data can help business to take quicker, better decision, how we will integrate data in the process. And we saw the process in the presentation of Tim. And then we can define what kind of data we need to collect, what kind of KPIs we need to build, and what will be the tool to give this data and these KPIs to people. But dashboard is only the final step, not the full analysis.
Very clear. Now, the reality is that when we speak of data analysis, we think it's after the party is over, and we're, let's sit down and look at the data. The event might be recurring, so and it happens again in 4 years, and then we have time to analyze it. But analysis and data can be extremely useful in real time, because it can allow you to make decisions and steer the ship the ship away of the iceberg. Can you give us a bit of an example of real-time analysis that could be useful, because it sometimes it's a bit too theoretical?
Yes, yeah, for sure. And even if we have two different timing, so during the event or during the season, real time, I will say, where we need to react quickly on operation, we can modify on the fly. And spoiler alert, this kind of analysis, it represents only few operations. And we have a second one, which is after the events, when we want to understand more deeply what happened to improve the next edition and so on. At the end, it's always the same. So we want to compare between what we expected and what we have. So I will give you an example with F&B spectator operation during the games.
So food and beverage, in case
yes,
anyone...
food and beverage. Yes, yeah. Sorry, food and beverage, exactly. So catering. And also a mock-up of dashboards that we can create to support the analysis. But I just have like three quick disclaimer to share before. The first one is data that I will share are representing a football club. But the idea is the same that what we did during the games, and the example I will give you, there are really decisions we made during the games. Mm-hmm. The second one is the challenge to collect the data. It's really a huge thing. So when we have a tool like a games management tool, like with Steam and so on, it's just a dream for us, because we don't have to think about how we will collect data. In Paris, mm-hmm. we had a huge challenge to consolidate all this kind of spectator food concession data. So mm-hmm. we implemented a data platform with 14 different food and beverage providers operating 40-ish different venues concession. So it was really huge. And the last one is example I will provide, as you said, are applicable to recurrent events, but that have some time between each event to take decision. So if we have like a one-off event, like a concert, or a one-night mega event like the Super Bowl, it will be really, really short to take this kind of decision on the food and beverage operation.
Okay, I think these are very good disclaimers. It helps us contextualize the example you're about to share. Let's see this food and beverage example that you have for us.
Yes, and let me share my screen to illustrate a bit the kind of decision we can take during the event. So we always start with a general overview, just to give the sense of the main KPI and the situation. So, for example, here you have a football club with two different seasons, the last year and the current year. So the last year, we set a target at 6 million and we exceeded the target. So this year we say, okay, maybe we can expand a little bit the target of the turnover to 10 million, for example. And as we are during the season, we still have some turnover to achieve. As you can see, we are not really at the level we should be at this stage because we should be at 6 million and we are only at 4.7. So let's try to understand why, and let's try to understand what we can do to modify this situation. This kind of page and overview, it's also a way to access different kind of analysis, I would say. So we have very specific and in-season analysis. So we want to answer clear question to say, okay, now we know the situation, what I can do to modify a little bit the situation and improve the situation. We have some thematic analysis like the weather. So we can do a focus on the weather impact on the consumption. And we have like a comparative analysis with all the different seasons. But we are now in the season, so we are running out of time and we need to take a decision to get to this 6 million target. So let's go to the specific season analysis and let's see what is the situation. So as I said, we are not at the level we expected. So we were expected 4.7 million at this stage of the season. So we were at 11 match around this season, around 18. So we were expected 6.1 million and we are at 4.7. So we achieve 77% of the target only. I will give you two examples of analysis we've done and decision we took during the games to try to modify a bit this situation. The first decision we took was about the concession. So about the concession, the idea was really to understand the profitability compared to the proximity. So for example, we closed some concession because they were really close to others and they were not profitable at all. So we did an analysis about what is the profitability of each concession. So for example, here you can see that we have negative profitability in red, but we took the decision based also on the over concession because the idea was not to impact the total turnover. So we wanted to be sure that the concession that will stay open can handle the additional customers. So for example, here it will be really complicated to close this one because, okay, they are really close one to the other, but they have approximately the same size in terms of turnover. So if we close this one, it will be really complicated to just handle the different customers. But for this one, we have 4 different concessions around, so we can take the decision to close it. And this is decision and discussion we had during the games with the different F&B manager to improve the situation.
Now,
yes.
let me stop you here because
go.
if we zoom back in to where you are, or the example that you insinuated in regards to the Paris Games, one might wonder why would you even have that many concessions next to each other in the first place? It's kind of like counterintuitive. I mean, especially if their products are comparable. Is it based on a mathematical calculation, on an algorithm saying that many spectators, or I need to have that many concessions, or are you shooting yourself in the foot?
It's a really good question. So during the games, we had like service levels, which are the different waiting time of people. So we say, okay, we don't want to have more than 15 minutes of waiting time when I want to get food. So we did calculation based on this service level to estimate the number of people that will come to this place and the number of people that we have to serve to ensure this kind of service level. And this is the data that we should have in this graphic. So not only the turnover, not only the profitability, but also the waiting time to take the decision to close some of them. But it's a data really complicated to collect, the waiting time. So we need to put additional IoT system and so on. So that's why for a moment, it's just a decision based on some assumption mainly. But the first decision to put this concession at this stage, it was based on the service level and the calculation we did.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The second kind of analysis we can do is regarding spectators. So for the spectators, we have some socio-demographic information through ticketing. It's really limited in France, and it's really complicated to analyze impact because we don't know exactly the profile of people per transaction due to GDPR, but also technical limitation and so on. It's not only GDPR, it's really technical limitation. It's really complicated to do compared to US.
Yeah, you don't want to get in trouble with Marie-Dominique.
Exactly.
So
I'll manage my relationship. Compared to US, for example, where you have like a bracelet with all the information in it, and when you pay, you just tap the bracelet, and you have all the information associated to the transaction. So in France, we can only analyze high-level impact, group impact by category of socio-demographic information. But as I said, we are during the event. We are running out of time. So we don't have so much time to analyze the socio-demographic impact and to try to do some assumption and so on. We just want to take decisions that will change the situation. So a kind of analysis we can do is just to analyze the behavior of people regarding the timing. So the hour of consumption. And by doing so, we highlighted an opportunity. So the concession closed before the end of the session. It was a security rule in France. And if we compare to the first half, we can see first half of the game, we can see that it's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity around 30 total transactions. So we say, okay, let's try to do a projection to estimate a little bit the different transactions we can do in addition, but also the turnover and the profit. Because it's not only selling more, it's if we open this kind of concession after the closing, the actual closing, what will be the cost associated? Cost in terms of people, cost in terms of energy, cost in terms of everything, stocks and so on. And so we took the decision, and we can do it concession by concession. Right now, you have just a vision about all the concessions at the same time. But the idea is to be able also to do it concession by concession. And at the end, we took the decision to open some concession later, not all of them. And when I say later, it was until the end of the session.
very, very, very interesting. Very interesting. Of course, here we look at one dimension of it, which is the inside the venue variable. One could also question what it means in terms of public transfer. Well, can you prolong indefinitely, and so on and so forth. But and I think the more layers you add to your analysis and the more data you have available, the more you can determine if a change in behavior is realistic. Correct?
Yes, exactly. But it's really complicated to estimate a change of behavior during the event because during a multi-days event, we can adjust hours of opening, just close some concession and so on, but we cannot really drastically reduce stock that we have ordered 6 months ago, or people that we have already hired, or thinking that if we put vegetarian food at the middle of the event, the consumption will completely change. It's not possible. So it's true that we can add over data to refine a little bit this analysis, but as we are during the event, the idea is to keep really simple and to have things that we can really change, really modify on the fly, and not trying to reinvent for the next edition, which is an overfit.
I'm conscious also of time because, and I want to make sure that I get to ask you a couple of more things. The first question is, so we see an example of the potential of data helping make those decisions. So what should how does an organizer get structured, prepared to leverage the data? What do they need to do other than hire a company like yours, which I'm sure is the first thing you're going to say?
No, not at all. No, the first thing is really to define with all the executive people what kind of information I need during the event to take better decision. So what are the current pain points during the event, and what data can help me to take quicker and better decision? And this is really the first thing. So put everyone on the same table and say, okay, what are the pain points and how data can support this? And then when you have defined this, you can hire a company like us to try to implement and to support. But having the executive sponsorship, executive empowerment around what are the possibilities with the data, it's really something that it's important, and we cannot do anything without that.
100%. And that's one of the questions that was asked. It was addressed to me, but we shared the answer. It is important that executives understand the importance of data. Again, data cannot do everything, but it can really support decision making. So positioning data as a tool, as an opportunity in the minds of executives, it is important. Executives have a tendency to think, "Oh, I'll make a decision and magic will happen." Well, decisions that are not relying on data do not always have the right the desired effect. So understanding from the executives the people that need to make the decision, and of course a robust a team that is able through good data capture to process the data and make it available, propose scenarios for the executives to make their decision on. And
Yes.
and then Kevin, maybe one last question for you. If you were to say, of all the things that we talked about, what would you see for any event, whether it is on the scale of the Olympic Games or a more regular football club operating? What is a type of analysis that would apply across the board, that events could really use no matter what their size or complexity?
Yes. So I just gave an example of during the event, but for me, the comparison between what have been planned and what have been actually consumed after the event, so this analysis to reduce the oversizing of different operations, is the number one analysis we should perform at the end of every event. So it should be like a mandatory analysis to compare this, to say, okay, this is what I plan, this is what I really perform. What is the gap between both, and how we can right size the resources, the equipment, people, and so on for the next time. The exact operation, it could be energy, it could be food and beverage, security, logistics, transport, and so on. It's really up to the organization, because each organization has their own priorities, for sure, and they don't deliver exactly the same operation. But for me, this comparison should be the number one analysis, the mandatory one.
And you agree that that analysis relies on, if I can simplify, two major components. One, which is the data capture, so the before and the after, but also another qualitative analysis, which is not so much data driven, which is the weather, or what is happening in the country that day, because there are other elements that could affect behavior on the sample that you're using for your analysis.
Yes, for sure. And having a dashboard to be able to do it is just a way to scale a little bit and to automate. But just starting with an analysis without a dashboard and so on, but just some data analysts working close to executive people to really assess it is the first step. And we can add so many qualitative data with a manual analysis, I will say. And then we can say, okay, this qualitative data, so for example, the weather, the impact of weather is really important. So for the next edition, let's put it in the tool, in the dashboard, so we'll have it automatically integrated in the analysis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. I think that was very, very useful, and I hope participants in these sessions were able to get this global picture of the importance of data, and how we can be smart about collecting it, about protecting it, and about leveraging it. So thank you so much to all three of you. We really appreciate your time. Thank you to those that asked questions, and then I'm going to pass the floor now back to Ilva and Neo to conclude this session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was very interesting to to hear all your stories, all your experience. Although I know quite a few of them, but still I learned new things for myself as well. Thank you, Lambis, for your efforts and moderating this session and giving your insights as well. I think it was very, very useful. Thank you, everyone who joined and who asked the questions. And we hope it was very interesting for you as well.